YouTube Live and Instagram Live, live channel, live conversation, coming to you guys for week number 3 of the 4 agreements. And this week we're talking about agreement number 3, which is to not make any assumptions. And so this ties in really well with don't take anything personally, the one that we talked about last week. And again, all of these assumptions are fairly obvious, right? When we start to think about them, there's nothing overly complex about them. But this one, I think, more than the previous two, being impeccable with your word, not taking anything personally, those ones are super obvious. This one, a little bit trickier because there's a lot of things that come from making assumptions. So let's dive into this because, for most of us, we pride ourselves in being really rational, really analytical. There's a few people out there listening that are really in tune with their emotional side, and that's amazing. But a lot of us are stuck in our own heads, very rational, very logical. And so we like to understand why things are, right? We want to know the truth about what something is, or we want an explanation for why something is the way that it is. And so the thing that we do to solve this problem is to make assumptions, right? It's not necessarily, or we're not always aware of when things aren't the truth, and we've just assumed something. And really, all this is kind of an easy button for not digging in deep and asking questions. And we've talked about this previously, right? Being really curious about what's going on, why other people are saying the things they're saying, why you're feeling the things that you're feeling. Asking questions and being curious about that is really the secret sauce. And that's when you don't do that, when you just assume that you know the answer, that's when you get into making assumptions. And so where this comes up really commonly is gossip, obviously, right? You something happens or you hear something and then you assume something about that, and you talk to other people about that assumption versus going to the person themselves and specifically asking them and getting clear on what's going on, right? So that one's common. But here's another one too: is assumptions in relationships, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a family member, whether it's a romantic partnership. A lot of times, especially once you've been with somebody for a period of time, you're always quick to assume that what your partner wants from you, or that they're going to do what you expect them to do, right? And so a lot of times your frustration, your anger comes out when they don't do that. And here's a perfect example. It's just garbage day the other day for us, and we didn't run into this problem last week, but it has come up in the past. You get up in the morning and the assumption is just, somebody's going to take care of the garbage, whoever sees it first. And so all of a sudden you get behind, you're busy, you don't get the garbage out. And so you leave it and you expect you assume your partner's going to do it, that they know that you missed it and that they're willing and able to do it before they leave for work. And you make assumptions that they have enough time in the morning to do it and that they're not going to fall behind schedule and all these things. And you come home and the garbage didn't go out and you're like, man, why didn't you take the garbage out? And all of a sudden you're upset, you're frustrated, you're angry at your partner, you're angry at yourself. And why? All because you made an assumption that they were going to know to take the garbage out because you didn't have the time to do it yourself. Right. And so that's what this one about. Agreement number 3, not making assumptions. So if we instead either left a note asking our partner to do something for us, or made sure that we had the time to do it ourselves, we could have avoided the problem all the way around. And that's ultimately what this comes down to. It's just taking the time to ask the questions to make sure that things are clear, and always feeling comfortable and confident asking questions, right? Because people can always say no, right? So if you run out of time and say, hey, can you take out the garbage for me? And they say, no, I don't have time. Then that's maybe a little bit more of a delicate conversation because you got to find a solution when neither of you feel that you have the time. But people always have the freedom to say no or yes, depending, right? So being really comfortable asking for what you need is part of making assumptions. When you just assume that somebody's not going to help you because you wouldn't help them, or somebody can't help you because you don't have the knowledge or the information or the time to help yourself, that kind of sets you back again as well, right? So this is another part where assumptions comes in when you take it onto yourself. So if there's something that you're believe in your head to be true, and you assume that everybody thinks the same way as you, that's not a great assumption, because everybody has different cultural backgrounds. They all had different beliefs that they grew up with in their family. Different parts of the world believe different things. And so when you're assuming everybody believes the same thing as you, that again causes problems, right? There's lots of different situations. Like maybe this is a good one as well. You got a common sink or kitchen area at work. And when you grew up and your family had lunch, and then you wash the cups and plates and dishes and bowls and put them away clean, all of a sudden you come in from lunch and there's a big pile of dirty dishes in the sink because one of your coworkers didn't wash their dishes. And you get mad, and you get frustrated, and you get angry, and you can gossip about them behind their back and say, Jody didn't wash the dishes today, and get really worked up about it. But what happened at the core of this? Again, you made an assumption that everybody shares with your belief that washing dishes after you eat them is the best way to do it. Whereas if you just said, let's set a company rule one way or the other that all the dishes have to get washed. Does anybody have an issue with that? Chances are people probably say, no, great, the sink's always clean all the time. Awesome. But until it didn't come up, maybe, in some other people where they grew up, the dishes got done at the end of the day. So those dishes are sitting in the sink and the person that left them there knew they're going to get to them at the end of the day, but they're totally comfortable with them sitting there all day long, whereas you need the sink for whatever it may be, and you're frustrated that the dirty dishes are there. See how simple this is? The assumption thing is really, really insidious. Like, it just sneaks in there all the time. You don't always know that it's happening. But a lot of the times, I'd say probably 90% of our problems are either making assumptions about something or taking something personally versus being curious and asking questions, trying to find out what people meant by what they said and what they're willing to, willing to compromise with if you're upset or frustrated or something's not going to work for you. And again, right, you always have the right to ask questions and people can say yes or no. And then same thing, you have to be open to the idea that people are always going to ask questions of you and you can say yes or no as well, because this is where I kind of run into trouble a lot personally. If somebody asks me to do something, I feel really guilty about saying no for whatever reason. And so oftentimes I won't ask for help when I need it for the same reason, because I know people feel guilty. I think that people think exactly the same as me and they feel guilty about saying no. And so I don't want to put them in that situation. So I just suck it up and do it myself. Whereas potentially somebody that you're going to ask for help has an abundance of time. They're looking for something to do. They just really enjoy whatever it is, taking out the garbage or washing dishes, to stick with the examples we talked about today. But maybe that's what they're really excited about. And you wouldn't know until you ask. So don't make assumptions. Get curious. Ask questions of yourself about the beliefs and thoughts that you have and whether or not they're true for everybody, because chances are they're probably not. And so once you appreciate that, then maybe you can ask some questions to get curious about how other people think or break things down or try to decide how to take action on something. And then through those questions, through being curious, through asking for help when you need it, and saying no when you're not available to give help to others, really, really powerful agreements. So we've got 3 agreements now in total. We've got being impeccable with your words, so being honest with yourself, being honest with others, not taking anything personally. So being aware of just because somebody says something to or about you doesn't mean it's true of you. And then finally today, not making assumptions. So making sure we're always curious, always asking questions, and not settling for our best guess of what's going on, because oftentimes when we make assumptions, as we discussed today, then that kind of goes sideways down the road. So hope you guys enjoyed that one. I'd love to hear if you've made any assumptions in the past. Go ahead and throw that in the comments down below. I'd love to hear some funny stories of something that happened that you made an assumption about and then it didn't turn out the way you imagined. It had some kind of funny resolution. To go ahead and throw those comments down below. And we'll see you guys back here next week, same time, same place, every Wednesday at 2:00 for our Wired for Wellness. And next week, we're wrapping up the 4 agreements with the 4th agreement. And then I'll share with you guys as well what's coming up in the month of rest of October. So